Hello everybody, welcome back to a predictions video that isn't being recorded at 3 or 5 in the morning. We haven't had that in a while. I think the last two predictions videos I've made, they've been hella early in the morning because that's when I did all my picks. And as a result, the picks kind of suffered. The picks weren't very good as a result. But instead of just doing them really early in the morning on Friday, I just did them really early in the morning yesterday and the day before that. Spring break, I have more time to do these picks, but I just kind of postponed them until like really late at night or really early in the morning. I don't get why, but at least now I'm kind of like able to project myself more. I'm able to talk better about these fights without the fear of waking up my parents. So yeah, that's that. And Marlon Cheeto Vera versus Corey Sandhagen, this fight was meant to happen a month ago, but they moved it over to the San Antonio card because the San Antonio card is kind of lacking a main event. And a lot of fans online were asking for the Marlon Cheeto Vera versus Corey Sandhagen fight to have a card. Not a card, to have a crowd. A lot of people thought this fight should have had a crowd around it, including myself. Definitely deserved a big crowd, and well, they got it. Fans got what they wanted. Fighters got what they wanted, and now it is a much bigger fight. It's a much bigger event, and this is the best case scenario for where this fight could have gone in my opinion. So yeah, let's just get straight into it for these fights. Two fights did get canceled already. I forgot which ones. It was Manuel Torres fight and the Tamiris Vidal fight. Those fights did get called off. One of them was yesterday, another one was today. And yeah, straight into it. Victor Altamirano versus Vinicius Salvador. Now I think this is a fairly even matchup. Altamirano has much more experience in the UFC octagon against higher level opponents. Altamirano has also beaten the much better opponents, whereas Salvador's best win is Shannon Ross, who isn't very good. Throughout Salvador's career, he usually loses when he fights a bit higher level guys. In such an even matchup, I think it's just going to come down to just experience mainly, and that's where Altamirano just has the advantage. So, this is a pick'em. This is like, even odds here, very fairly even. I can't move my mouse. I don't know what's going on here. You see that wheel? I don't know what's going on there, but yeah. As to my pick, I do have Altamirano winning by a decision, comfortable unanimous decision. That's my pick there, and we're gonna move on to the next fight: CJ Vergara versus Daniel Lacerda, or Daniel Lacerda. Is that his last name? I'm pretty sure. Someone said that Daniel Lacerda has pretty much like an interchangeable last name. He has like two last names. But yeah, I don't remember his last name being Daniel Lacerda. So this is like a whole new person to me. Yeah, CJ Vergara versus Daniel Lacerda. This is Daniel da Silva, right? Pretty sure it's Daniel da Silva. Yeah. This is Daniel da Silva. Yeah. So Daniel Lacerda is Daniel da Silva. For those of you who don't know, that is the same person. Even the haircut threw me off. I kind of didn't know who this guy was. Yeah. I don't have a lot about this fight. Pretty much, Daniel da Silva, he's kind of on his way out of the UFC. He's 0-3, all by finishes, and in his last two fights, he's been knocked out in the first round. Not knocked out. I think one of them was a submission as well. He has a much higher chance of winning this fight than all of his other fights. CJ Vergara is easier compared to some of the guys that Lacerda or Da Silva has faced. But I think Vergara is just going to bring it. I think he's going to put a lot of pressure and get a first or second round knockout to get the crowd going. He has fought some of the like kind of equal level to like the guys that Lacerda has fought, but Vergara has had much more success in those fights. He showed much more skill and much more ability to take bigger hits. He hasn't been knocked out by those guys in the UFC. He hasn't been finished. He has been finished. He has been submitted in the UFC. He hasn't been knocked out. So yeah, like I said here, Daniel da Silva. That just really threw me off. I think CJ Vergara gets a knockout in the first round, and Lacerda or da Silva, however you want to call him, he's gonna be on his way out of the UFC. I think he might get cut. There was the Manuel Torres versus Trey Ogden fight. That fight has since been called off, but just in case, Manuel Torres, he did have a lot of stomach issues. He was he was calling the UFC staff at 3 a.m. He had a lot of stomach pain. Fight had been called off, so the UFC, medical professionals had to go to him. But we don't know whether the fight's gonna be rescheduled or whether it's the UFC's got different plans for them. But my original pick for these guys was Manuel Torres by first round submission. I'm not gonna go into who I like, the whole story of what this fight was gonna be, because realistically there's no point. So just in case, just magically this fight is back on for tomorrow, I'll just have that there. So yeah, Trevin Giles versus Preston Parsons. Let me see what I have written down about this fight here. Yeah. Preston Parsons, let's see. This is another pick'em. This is another very close fight in terms of betting odds. The match, the people who have money on this fight, pretty close here in terms of betting line odds. Parsons has very good wrestling. Almost all his fights have ended in the first or second round, with the only exception being his most recent fight against Evan Elder. Tapology will show that Trevin Giles is really good on the ground as well, but in reality, he's not that great. He's not all that great, especially in the UFC where he has no submission wins. Giles has somewhat better striking and much more knockouts, but isn't good at capitalizing when he hurts his opponents, which sometimes later leads to him getting knocked out later in the fight. We've seen this in his more recent fights. Parsons has no knockout wins, but he's only ever been knocked out by guys like Daniel Rodriguez and Mike Perry, two of the best guys on his resume, and two very good strikers as well. Parsons, I think, will be able to avoid the big shots and implement his ground game as well. It'll take a lot for Trevin Giles to knock Parsons out, in my opinion. I think it'll be difficult for Giles to submit him as well. Parsons is much better on the ground, and he might even submit Giles. But since Parsons got knocked out by Daniel Rodriguez, he's kind of changed up the pace at which he fights at, and kind of fights at a different pace, takes his time a bit more, but is still able to do everything the same, is still able to be effective. I think Parsons will show dominance on the ground, and I think he will win via unanimous decision. That's my pick there, although a submission win for Preston Parsons is very much possible as well. But my pick is Preston Parsons via UD. We're going to move on to Steven Peterson versus Lucas Alexander. Lucas Alexander has a really cool tattoo. I think that's just pretty clear, right? That's pretty obvious, but I really need to talk about his tattoo. His tattoo is so cool. I mean, it is really, really cool. It's one of the cooler tattoos I've seen in the UFC. But yeah, the betting odds for this fight as well. Steven Peterson is the slight betting odds favorite at minus 155, with his opponent being a plus 135. Steven Peterson, 19-10, so not the best record in his professional career, but it doesn't tell the whole story. Peterson is tough as nails. He will always walk through the fire. He isn't afraid of getting hit or facing adversity and can take shots. In fact, in his professional career, he has only been knocked out once ever, and it was almost 10 years ago, back in 2013. His toughness does lead to his downfall at times, however, as he can rely on his toughness, which doesn't always win you fights, and most times he loses decisions because of it. 9 out of those 10 losses you see on this record, 9 of them are unanimous decision losses. Some of them are split decision, majority decision. Some of them are close. He toughs a lot of them out. And this is why you see so many losses on his record. Most of them are pretty close, and the ones that he more clearly loses are against higher level fighters such as Alex Caceres, who is currently ranked number 15 at featherweight. We know Peterson's not getting finished on the feet, so let's look at what Lucas Alexander offers on the ground, right? Lucas Alexander has no submission wins. In fact, all 3 of his losses in his professional career come by submission. This tells us that Alexander will not want to take this fight to the ground. He doesn't want this fight to take place on the ground, either fighter, right? And it's important to note that, yes, Peterson has a couple of submission wins, but none of them are in the UFC. I'm stuttering a lot. That's my bad. But you guys know what I'm saying, right? What I'm taking from this is that there will be a lot of striking, maybe control time against the fence at most. That will likely be the story of this fight and where it will go. Alexander is a bit of a slow starter. He has no finishes in the first round, and every time he has been finished, it was in the first round against quick submission guys. Now, this is okay because the last time Peterson got a first round knockout win, it was in 2012, 9 years ago, and it was a TKO because the other guy got some sort of elbow injury, right? It's not really the same thing. So in the first round, Alexander will start slow. Peterson will capitalize. Peterson will likely win the first. The rest of the rounds will either be a firefight, a barn burner. That will likely be a fight of the night contender, or Peterson finds a submission win, and that his UFC career has been missing all this time. I'm going for the first option. I think it'll be a fun featherweight scrap. I think Peterson will take the win, especially since Peterson is the much more experienced fighter and has fought the much better fighters in his career. I'm going to go with this fight going to a unanimous decision, and I'm going to say Steven Peterson takes it by unanimous decision. We're going to move on to the featured prelim. Yeah, pretty sure this is the featured prelim. Daniel Pineda versus Tucker Lutz. Now, Pineda has had a very weird career. First, let's go over the betting odds. Daniel Pineda is a sizable favorite Daniel is a sizable underdog at plus 230. Tucker Lutz is the favorite at minus 275. He is a clear favorite there. Pineda I said this, he's had a very weird career so far. What I mean is that the same amount of wins that he's had in the UFC is the same amount of losses he's had in Bellator at 4. That's pretty crazy. He's competed in the PFL twice, and they were both no contests, which is also pretty strange. In his last 5 fights, he's only 1-1 because the other 3 fights came by way of no contest. Not only does he have a losing record in the UFC, but he also signed to the promotion back in 2012, around 9 years ago, and he got released in 2014. He was re-signed, however, in 2020. He's also never won a fight by a decision, and he's only ever finished fights he won. He's got a 100% finish rate in his career. But besides the weird MMA career of Daniel Pineda, let's just, besides that, right? Been a little tangent about how weird this guy's career is. But in fights, as each round starts, Pineda comes out strong, accurate, and fast. You'll see this in some of his more recent fights. But he fades after the first few minutes. The more he gets caught, he fades even more. You know, as he starts to fade in these rounds, he's very easy to hit, and at most times get very close to being finished, or gets finished entirely, which is what's happened in his last 2 fights. You know, first few minutes, Daniel Pineda is a pretty dangerous fighter. He is a very dangerous fighter, and he does bring that pace, but as he fades, he does fade heavily, and I said this. Pineda also hasn't fought in a year and 9 months. Tucker Lutz, on the other hand, hasn't fought in a year and 4 months, so both of these guys have had some time off away from the cage. Lutz is someone who's more skilled on the feet. Did I say more skilled? No, he's just skilled on the feet and has been wrestling ever since the 3rd grade. He used to finish all his fights. However, since going on the Contender Series and joining the UFC, all his fights have gone the distance, whether it was a win or a loss. He's also very hard to finish and has only been knocked out once in his career. It was back in 2015 in his first ever professional fight. You're going to see a lot of submissions on Pineda's UFC record, but they all come on the UFC record, but they all came in the 2012 or 2013, kind of area, the kind of time span, Like I mentioned before, it was against much less experienced guys that weren't too good. Also, in his more recent fights, Pineda usually decides to implement his ground game only if he gets hurt or clipped badly. Throughout his career, if Pineda was fighting someone with a decent amount of experience against other good fighters, he would lose these fights. This is especially present in his UFC career. I think Tucker Lutz is much more active. I think he will land a lot of shots. I think he'll implement his wrestling much better and gather up some good control time. I think he'll gather somewhat of a comfortable UD win, and that's what I'm going to go with. Tucker Lutz, unanimous decision win for him there. We're going to move into the main card where Chidi Njokuani comes back against Albert Duraev. Now we're going to look at this fight. Chidi Njokuani is a slight betting favorite at minus 150. You're going to look at this fight and think, well, Njokuani is very dangerous. I think he should be a much bigger favorite in this fight, but the thing with Albert Duraev is he is pretty dangerous on the ground, or at least that's what his typology would tell you. Based off of what I got here, what I studied off of both these guys' more recent fights, and even fights that they won, fights that they lost. First off, when we look at Duraev's typology, you'll see that he has been knocked out since 2014, if we're not counting the doctor stoppage in his last fight where he had a swollen eye. His left eye was swollen shut. So if we're not counting that, last time he was knocked out was in 2014. But if we look at Njokuani's resume and who he's fought, since he fought in the Contender Series, when Njokuani fought people, he would be the first person to knock them out in their careers, and even still be the only person to have knocked them out, with the exception of being Dusko Todorovic, who has been knocked out before and after his fight with Njokuani. But other than that, Chidi Njokuani would be the first guy to knock these guys out, and it would be quick and brutal. You saw the fight with Marc-Andre Barrial where he knocked him out in 16 seconds. You saw the fight with Todorovic, or the fight on the Contender Series where he would knock these guys. With Todorovic, he knocked him out in the first round by a brutal elbow, very bad elbow. And in the Contender Series where he was adjusting to the higher levelness, he would knock them out in the 3rd round. Either way, he would be the first guy to knock these guys out. The only exception is Gregory Rodriguez, where he pushed too much of a pace. He went a little bit too crazy in the first, gassed himself out. Rodriguez survived because he had that dog in him, at least at the time he did. And eventually he was able to get the win by a ground and pound in the 2nd round because Njokuani was able to tire himself out. Now Njokuani's walking into this fight now. This shows us what I talked about before. It shows us that Njokuani could finish this fight. I could finish it quickly, no matter what Topology says. If Albert Duraev hasn't been knocked out since 2014, the guys that Njokuani's fight had in the UFC had not been knocked out ever before, or had not really been in that much trouble ever before. Njokuani could knock out Albert Duraev. It's very possible. It's much more possible than the odds makers would believe it to be. Duraev still has nice striking and does have nice grappling, but in his recent fights usually implements wrestling when he's hurt. The same thing with one of the other fighters I talked about a little bit earlier. And Njokuani is also a very good striker and has good takedown defense. The main difference in this fight is going to be power. That's very clear from the get-go, is the power. And Njokuani's quickly finished almost everybody he's fought in the UFC. He's very powerful, very powerful. I mean, this guy's hella powerful. Even if he's not putting you out, he's putting on nasty cuts on your head. He's putting that wear and tear on you. If you fight Chidi Njokuani, you could tell. You could tell by just the look on their face, if they're cut up, if they're bruised up, or if they've just been knocked out. Chidi Njokuani leaves a mark, a lasting effect on everybody he fights. I don't expect this fight to be much different. But the guys that have never been finished get finished by Njokuani. That's what I've been talking about before. Duraev, on the other hand, has been sat down multiple times in his last few fights. Even fights where he would get dropped or be in trouble, that he wins. You know, he would be dropped or get in trouble in these fights. Now, if Duraev faces the adversity well and goes into the second round, Chidi might gas out like he did in his last fight. Duraev might take the win from there. Who knows? Maybe ground and pound, just control on the ground. But if Chidi Njokuani, what was I talking about? Yeah. But if Chidi Njokuani doesn't put people through adversity, Njokuani puts them out. Njokuani will be too powerful for a guy like Duraev, who gets dropped a lot by people with less power than Chidi. I think Chidi takes the fight by a knockout in the later in the first round. I'm going to say Chidi Njokuani, comeback knockout win there. Big for the crowd, going to get the crowd going for the first main card fight of the night. And yeah, that's what I expect for Njokuani there. We're going to move on to Alex Perez versus Manel Kape. Very fun flyweight fight here. All the flyweight fights are very fun. I don't expect this fight to be any different. This fight's very good. Do not sleep on this fight. It's going to be a very nice fight. If we look at the fight, at the matchup here, Manel Kape is a slight minus 190 favorite for this fight. Let me pull up. Oh, yeah, I got it here. Both fighters are very quick. You know, they're flyweights. And they're very exciting to watch. You know, they're flyweights. So both things you just kind of expect. It's a flyweight fight, so we can expect action. Throughout Perez's UFC career, when he goes up against really good fighters, he gets finished very quickly. But when he goes up against guys that aren't that good, he usually wins quickly. And even though Manel Kape isn't on the same level as a Deiveson Figueiredo or as a Alexandre Pantoja, he's still better than almost everybody that Alex Perez has ever beaten in his career. Even though Perez hasn't won in a couple of years, it was still against top 3 flyweights, some of the best flyweights in the world, and Perez could still get it done anywhere. It's possible, but Manel Kape has never been finished in the UFC. He's also never been knocked out in his professional career. Perez is much better on the ground, but I still don't think he'll get a submission against Manel Kape. Kape will be able to deny the takedowns well enough and have good enough moments on the feet as well. I think there's a chance that either guy gets a finish early, Kape by KO or Perez by submission if either one were to happen. But I don't think it will happen. I think at the moment, Kape is just the better fighter. I think he's been more active. He's had a lot more success and has had the more cage time in the last few years, especially compared to Alex Perez, who really hasn't had a lot of that. I also think Kape's striking is much better, which will make the difference in a flyweight barn burner like I expect this fight to be. I say Kape goes the distance. I say he wins a unanimous decision. Yeah. Manel Kape, unanimous decision win. I'm very comfortable with that pick. I feel like I'm very safe with Manel Kape here. Even though Alex Perez, he still could get it done. You never know. Just think Manel Kape right now has showed a lot more to us in the more recent years and is the better fighter at the moment. I say Kape by unanimous decision. We're gonna move on to Andrea Lee versus Macy Barber. Now, Macy Barber, a sizable favorite at minus 260. This is a women's flyweight bout between two ranked women's flyweights. If I look here, This will be a striking heavy match, in my opinion. I don't really see it going to the ground that much. The fact that it's in front of the crowd, I expect that there to be a decent amount of action, especially in comparison to most women's flyweights fights, in terms of like lower ranked people. Macy Barber is a very sizable favorite in this fight, but the odds are much close. But this fight is much closer than the odds will tell you. You know, we saw how dangerous Andrea Lee really can be on the feet in her last fight. We saw her almost finish Vivian Araujo in the first round. While Macy Barber has been improving more and more. Even in her last fight, the striking didn't look as good or as powerful as Andrea Lee's. Barber has good clinch work, has nice elbows. I think she might even use this to her advantage. What is that? That's just my airband. In this fight. But I think this fight, like I said earlier, is going to be a lot of pure striking, a lot of work on the feet. And on the feet, Andrea Lee is just much more skilled. She has better technique, she has more power, and overall is more dangerous. Also, the fact that Andrea Lee has had much more MMA experience as well as UFC Octagon experience and has fought tougher opponents and fights tough opponents more often as well. Everything about this matchup, I don't know why Barber is such a sizable favorite, but I think Andrea Lee will win a comfortable 29-28 unanimous decision here. I'm going to go with the underdog, Andrea Lee. UD, maybe even split decision, who knows, but I think she'll win comfortably enough that the judges will definitely see it her way. I think she's just much more skilled. I went over this already, and yeah, this is my underdog pick. This is my kind of hot take pick. Nate Landwehr versus Austin Lingo. I really don't know what that noise is. Hear that? I think that's something outside. Let me turn down the background noise a bit there. Nate Landwehr versus Austin Lingo. Obviously, Alex Caceres was meant to fight Nate Landwehr before Austin Lingo stepped in. Alex Caceres, he is number 15 at at featherweight. If we look at this fight, Nate Landwehr is a sizable favorite at minus 200. Austin Lingo is a plus 170 favorite. It'll tell you right here that Nate Landwehr is number 15 at featherweight, but that's just wrong. Alex Caceres is number 15 at featherweight right now. If you were to look at the rankings before this fight takes place, Alex Caceres is number 15 at featherweight, and I think Alex Caceres, the fight would have been much more fun in my opinion. Alex Caceres is a much more fluid striker, much more fun to watch striker. In my opinion, I think Caceres would have won that fight, but now that it's Austin Lingo, we got to think about more possibilities. It's a different outcome now. Nate Landwehr, he's allergic to boring fights. This guy just avoids boring fights. As much as he can avoid boring fights, he will, and he's always getting the crowd going. But now having a short notice opponent will definitely benefit Nate in this fight. Nate Landwehr can be hit with a lot of hard shots, but he will always want more. He will always fight back. Nate Landwehr is good at weathering storms like he did in his last fight against David Onama. The first round where he was dominated and came back in the second and third rounds to win a Fight of the Year contender. Granted, Onama did gas out in the first round, but regardless, you can't stop Nate the Train. Even in fights that Nate the Train gets stopped in, he's ready to keep going. That Julian Erosa fight, he wasn't out. He was ready to keep going, man. This guy does not stop. He doesn't want to stop. And Austin Lingo hasn't fought in around a year and 7 months and will be met with a great surprise from Nate Landwehr when Nate immediately pushes the pace and puts a lot of pressure on Lingo after such a long time away from the octagon. It's going to be tough to overcome that if you're Austin Lingo, especially all that time away. You're just not going to really expect what Nate Landwehr is going to bring to you. Nate the Train is all action, and I expect him to tough out a UD win in this fight. I say Nate Landwehr takes this fight, unanimous decision, maybe 29-28, but I expect 30-27, and it's going to be a fight of the night contender. It's a lot of fight of the night contenders in this card, but yeah, that's my pick there. The co-main event, Holly Holm versus Yana Santos, formerly Yana Kunitskaya. She recently got married. That's why she took all that time off. She did get married. She did have a child. A lot going on in the life of Yana Santos. If we look at both these fighters, I think Holly Holm was just the best bantamweight. Right behind Amanda Nunes and Juliana Pena. She's just the best right behind them. Since losing to Nunes in 2019, she's beaten Raquel Pennington, Irene Aldana, and a lot of people think she should have beat Kellen Vieira in her last fight. Holly Holm is at the top. She's on a roll right now in women's bantamweight. She's on a tough streak as well, man. Yana Santos, formerly Yuna Kunitskaya, as I mentioned earlier, on the other hand, hasn't fought in a year and 8.5 months, where she, in her last fight, was knocked out by Irene Aldana. Someone Holly Holm beat more recently. That was Yana Santos' last fight. In the first round, she got knocked out by Irene Aldana. Since then, she had a kid, she got married, she had a lot of things happening in her personal life, and now she is coming back. In that time that Yana Santos has been dealing with so many things outside of MMA, Holly Holm has gone on a run in the top 5 of the women's bantamweight division. On top of that, is the fact that Holly Holm has fought the much tougher opponents throughout her career, has been fighting the highest level bantamweights for the longest time, not even just in the time that Yana Santos has been out, but just throughout her career, man, and has had such an extended MMA career, and she's not even slowing down either. I have no doubt in my mind that Holly Holm will be able to take this fight by UD. I think, honestly, Yana Santos, for her comeback fight, should have fought anybody else. Someone even ranks maybe below her, or, I don't know. Holly Holm, that's just a tough fight to take, man. I no doubt in my mind, Holly Holm takes this fight, unanimous decision win. I really don't see it going any other way. This is one of the fights that I'm almost guaranteed is gonna go this way. But here's the thing: in the last couple of events that I've had those like safe bets, like, oh yeah, someone's gonna take this fight by UD. I'm very safe with this bet. Usually they end up losing. Most times they do end up losing. So who knows? Maybe the upset gets pulled off. But yeah. Holly Holm is a sizable favorite as well at minus 245. I think her age is something that a lot of people are looking at. It's like, oh, maybe she should slow down at any time, but that's just not what we're seeing right now. Holly Holm, she is 41 years old, but she's just kept going. She's still fighting at the highest level, and I don't think Yana Santos is gonna be the one to stop her. Realistically, I think Holly Holm wins by unanimous decision. Now, the main event. The main attraction, Marlon Chito Vera versus Corey Sandhagen. This is number 3 now versus number 5 in bantamweight. These are some of the 2 best bantamweights on planet Earth right now. This is a very exciting bantamweight match. One of the more exciting bantamweight matchups you could get right now. And if we look at it, Marlon Chito Vera. Actually, let me pull up what I have written down about this fight. This fight, I think, is going to go the distance. Honestly, I don't think... Listen, neither fighter has been knocked out in the UFC. And the fight will probably not go to the ground either. I think that's probably like the last thing these 2 fighters have on their mind, really. Everybody knows Chito is a slow starter. In most of his recent fights, he takes his time to find the right shot, which we saw in his fights with Dominic Cruz and Frankie Edgar. Chito is a very heavy hitter. We all know this. I think Sandhagen will get hit with some big shots throughout the fight. Also, Chito isn't very good at moving backwards or moving around the octagon, which will be an issue when Sandhagen starts to be pushing the pace. I think Sandhagen will outstrike Chito for sure. I think that's most people think is going to happen. I also think Chito will put Sandhagen down maybe more than once as well. I think that's a big possibility. It's something that could definitely happen. Here's how I see the fight going. First round will be the feeling out round. It'll be close, and you could give it probably to either side. Round 2, I think Sandhagen will push the pace more, and Chito won't do a lot in the round aside from maybe land a big shot. I think Chito will also struggle to be avoiding or defending the shots well, but he won't be in too much trouble. This will be one of the more clear Sandhagen rounds, in my opinion. Round 3, Chito will be much better defense-wise. He will land more shots than he did in round 2. He'll land the bigger shots. I see him setting down Sandhagen. I see him setting Sandhagen down, and I still see Sandhagen outstriking Chito regardless. Probably having more control of the fight. In that time, maybe even control against the fence like we saw against Song Yudong. Corey Sandhagen's arsenal is just a bit more diverse now, so control against the fence is something that I do see possibly happening in this fight. I think round 4 will be a Chito round. I see him landing bigger shots, see him outstriking Sandhagen as well in this round. I see Sandhagen being in trouble at some points in this round, but I don't think he'll be finished. Chito might even set him down in this round, like I talked about before. He might be set down in this round. He will be in trouble at some points. Round 5, both fighters will tough it out and stand and bang with each other in a somewhat close round. Overall, I see a 48-47 going either way. I think Sandhagen will take the fight by UD. He's got a lot more skill on the feet and ground. I think the outstriking and maybe even some control time will take it to a UD win that I don't think many people will disagree with me. I predict the scorecards will be 48-47, 48-47, and 49-46 for Corey Sandhagen there. He is a slight betting favorite at minus 165. So yeah, I don't know. I I think it's gonna be somewhat of a close fight. A lot of people and a lot of the other fights, Marlon Vera just relied on his power. I don't think his power is gonna be enough to put out Corey Sandhagen. That's just the thing with this fight for me here. That's why I'm very skeptical about Cheeto in this position in this fight. I say Corey Sandhagen takes it, unanimous decision win, and yeah, I don't really know what else to say about that. Yeah, these are my picks. I'm much more confident with these picks than I was in my Yandi Valishvili or Edwards Usman picks for sure. But yeah, a lot of decision wins. I got a lot of decision wins here. I know in my last predictions video, I took a lot of risks. I went a bit crazy in some different directions, and I did pay the price for that. I think I went below half of my but less than half of my picks actually landed on the right person. So that hasn't happened since January, since the first card of this year. So not very good for me there. And playing it a bit more safe this time around. I think there's going to be a lot of barn burners and a lot of fun fights, a lot of pretty good scraps. And yeah, the Texas crowd is going to be great. The fights are going to be great. Yeah, there are 8 ranked fighters on this card. Yeah, there's like 8 ranked fighters on this card right now. And yeah, I expect fun fights. I expect this to be one of the better fight nights, maybe even of this year. But I expect this to be one of the better fight nights of this first quarter. You know, January through March, the first three months of 2023. So yeah, Marlon Cheeto Vera versus Corey Sandhagen, UFC Fight Night in San Antonio, March 25th. It's going out tomorrow, and yeah, I already said this many times. I expect fun fights and nothing less.